Do you know what my favorite kind of tree is? Bonsai.
Hey there, CNCers! Scott here again for CNC Labs. Welcome to the spookiest time of the year. We're going to show you how to make fast, cheap, and easy to carve tombstones so your Halloween decor can be on point and the most dreadful on the block. Let's get eerie! So for this tutorial, we wanted to focus on how easy it is to turn one piece of this rigid foam into 6 or potentially more, depending on size, of these awesome looking things, right? Because the foam carves so easily and so clean without worrying about loss of detail or bloats or anything like that, you can run your machine full tilt and create a whole ton of these at lightning speed. So for the beginners out there in this is kind of what we're looking at. It is, we wanted to do just a single bit so that if you weren't comfortable with moving and doing all the shaking, then you could just create an awesome looking tombstone just like this. So it was very, fairly simple. I created some text here with whatever I wanted. I brought in my Halloween-y looking graphic. I created the shape of my stone, and I did a couple of offsets so that I can have a couple of different layers in here. So, it looks a little bit fancier than just nothing. After that, I just selected my couple of offset lines and my Halloween-y looking graphics and all my text, and I created a pocket toolpath, which if you do that, you'll get this. You can see here that my cut depth was just 0.05. It was just an end mill. My speeds were 1/4 inch because I wasn't going down very far, so I didn't need to go anymore, and 150 and 50 for feeds and speeds. This thing turned out in minutes. It was lovely. I then used a 1/4 inch, again, 1 bit, 1 tombstone. I created a profile, right there. There it is. Same thing, same feeds, same speeds. Bang this out. We added ramps, we named it. And when you calculate, you get this awesomeness. Pretty hard to complain about. 1 bit, 1 awesome decoration. The way that we took the basic but awesome looking tombstone and leveled it up like the rest of the tombstones that I made was by adding, ta-da, a 60-degree VBit. That's the only real difference. There wasn't anything super complicated about these other ones that I'm showing here versus the 1-bit wonders. However, the level up process did include multiple bits, and multiple bits means tool changes or bit changes. And while yes, they seem daunting and scary, I promise you they are not that bad once you know how to do them. So we have a video focused just on the basics of bit changes, and that will absolutely help you through the process to take you from, beginner level looking stuff to awesomeness. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the actual detail process because, truth be told, I think you guys are probably at that level. Even as beginners, you'll be able to understand that it's just creating text and adding graphics to your black heart's content to make it look spooky. My settings for all of these, let's go over here to see more worms and see what we did. There's my V carve right up there. There's my 60-degree 1/4 inch, and here are my settings for it. And if I'm being totally honest, that could get cranked up. So past depth of a 1/4 inch was no problem whatsoever. 150. I think I kept the plunge rate a little bit lower just because I found it tore the foam a little bit if you got crazy. But the feed rate, that thing zipping around, sky's the limit. I had this thing cranked here and in G-Center, and there was no issues whatsoever. So that was about it. I copied and pasted between things, changed fonts, added some different graphics that were spooky and fun looking. My middle kid was nice enough to point out that this should have been a pig, not a skull. And he is 100% right. And I had already carved it, or I'd fix it. And that was it. So I added my details. They were gruesome looking and wonderful and awesome. And once I was done with all of that, all I did was roll over into saving my toolpaths. And as I've started to do a little bit more commonly now, and I'm a little less paranoid, I group them together if I can. So if you group your 60s, you can save visibles to 1 file. And I did the same thing with the 1/4 inch end mills, which are the exact same settings as the RIP down here. And that's about it. And even for the ones that were, a little more difficult, like this guy that had a whole bunch of things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those were all in the same file. So it just ran to its heart's content and had a good time. Most of the tombstones in this file have multiple bits in them, which requires a bit change. It's what part of this video is all about. If you're not sure how to do it, I'll give a quick rundown, and then we are again going to create that secondary video to go through a little more detailed process. So the link will be right here, I think, is where it's supposed to go. So check right there for the link if you're not sure. We're still able to group like bits together. So the VBits and the end mills, we can still group them, boom, boom, and then we can save basically 2 G-code files, and then we're off and running. So for this one, again, the words and the cracks are both VBits, so there they are. And we are going to save the visible toolpaths to one file. It tells us which ones, and then we're going to hit Save Toolpath. I have, of course, renamed them to words and cracks so that we know there are 2 files in here. Boom, I'm gonna replace it, sure. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the second G-code file I'm creating, which is, again, visible toolpaths, both of those 1/4" end mills, boom, save. And again, I've labeled them pocket inside and outside, so I know what this actual G-code file is. Save, yes. That is the first part of a bit change kind of operation. You save out 2 different files or many different files. It could be 3 or 4 or 5, however many G-code files you have. You run over to your machine, you get your material strapped down, you put your first bit in, you zero it out. You run it, you change your bit, you zero it out, you run it, and you just keep on wash, rinse, and repeating. It's really not that scary. So from here, that's all I did. I opened up my first one in VCarve, I let the foam fly. I opened the second one in VCarve, I let the foam fly, and I turned out some awesome tombstones in record amount, quickly, fasty, lightning, craziness. So we're gonna cut to some awesome B-roll of that happening now, and I'll probably tell you a little bit more about the finishing process while that's going. As far as distressing the foam itself, obviously we had the LongMill carve some cracks into it, but I wanted to break all those hard edges. So I used a simple sanding block or sandpaper, and I went over everything. I took chunks out. I basically wanted to look like they've been outside for 100 years. So I just kind of went to town, smoothed some things out, chunked some things out. The other thing I did was, if you use just a simple spray bottle with water, spray it, and then use a heat gun, you can kind of get this bubbly, textured looking effect to it. So when you combine that with the paint that you put over top and then some of the detail painting after, it looks like seriously vintage aged stone. The only caution is if you're using the heat gun, be very careful around any fine details. It will tend to distort them and melt them to the point where they're not really recognizable. If that's the look you're going for, knock yourself out, but just use the heat gun with a certain amount of caution. The other thing I did to hopefully extend the longevity of my tombstones was I added some plastic tubes inside them. These are literally from like a dollar store or kid's toy. I used to drilled them out. A word of caution on that, just be careful that you don't go up or down because you will, blow to your tombstone. And it's just gonna keep them, stick a couple of sticks in the ground, slide those on top, and it should help them last a whole bunch more years. As far as actually painting these beasts go, I just used some simple white latex paint I had laying around with some sand, and I added some black acrylic paint to it to give it that kind of gray stony color. I got it into all cracks and crevices, and once it was dry, I went back in with some super watered down black, brown, and green paint to create washes. So I'd paint it over, I'd let it drip, and then I'd use either a sponge or a paper towel to kind of blot it out and add some more color texture to the textured stone look. I did this a bunch of different times because it took a couple times to figure out the right kind of mixture of paint to water to get it to stay on there. You'll also see that at some point I lay them down because I wanted some of the paint to actually pool and stay in place versus just kind of washing off. So, experiment, have fun until it looks like a really old tombstone. And to really kind of hopefully set off those washes, I used a couple of different techniques of dry brushing, airbrushing, and just going in and generally oldifying them. It wasn't anything, it's experimentation, guys. I am not a pro on this. There's lots of videos out there. All I did was kind of go in with those different earthy, oldie, vintagey looking tones, add them here and there, tried to make it look natural. If you want to add some more extras, fake moss or vines or something, you knock yourself out, but that's all I did for mine. And then once all of that stuff was done, I threw a exterior grade clear coat on it because I don't want these things to kind of go funky after a year of having them. So something I found was super, super helpful in making all of these tombstones, because I did a bunch, was making those stands that you see them sitting on. It's literally just some leftover scraps from the shed, a couple of screws and a couple of dowels or a couple of screws in them to keep them from falling over while you're painting them. Well worth the time to make them, I would say. That's it for finishing. So there you have it, folks. From foam to fearful, all carved on your LongMill. These tombstones were a ton of fun to create.
Brains.
These tombstones were a ton of fun to create, pretty cheap to make, and they carve super fast because they're made of foam. As always,
Hey, hey, ho, ho. Tombstones is the way to go.
As always, we hope you found this sinister and satisfying. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. Please make sure that you're liked and subscribed, and oh look, my wife's gonna finally show her face on one of my projects. Please make sure you're liked and subscribed so you don't miss out on any of the horrifying content we're creating for you. And until the next one, we'll see you around the Spook and See.